Morning, everyone. Just getting all our folks in here. It's great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this morning. Happy Wednesday. Hello, everyone. My name is Loretta Gerlach, and I'll be hosting today's webinar on public presentations and public speaking. And before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to leave the 15 minutes at the end as an opportunity for folks to make comments or ask any questions. I am sharing my screen. It's a bit difficult for me to see the questions throughout. So my colleagues who have joined us here from Student Services are going to watch the chat, compile any questions. So if you think of a question while we're going through, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat, and we will make sure that we get to all of those at the end, and they'll keep me accountable. We are recording this session just as a reminder. So we'll be recording the presentation part. We'll stop recording for the questions and answers at the end. In order to protect our bandwidth, it'd be great if you could turn your cameras off. It looks like everybody has turned their cameras off, just so that we can make sure that you've got the privacy that you need, as well as protecting that bandwidth. So we will make this session available if you wish to look at it later, somewhere around 24 to 48 hours after completion of the session. We're not sharing the slide deck today, so if you have if you're so moved, feel free to take notes. Today, we are going to focus specifically on the micro-credential and presentation and public speaking. And I will just make some quick comments here at the beginning around the programs of the micro-credentials and badges that are available. But I'm going to go through that fairly quickly under the assumption that maybe folks are familiar already or have seen it in other webinars. So in the event that you have any questions at all about anything we talk about today or the programs, please direct your questions to Student and Instruction Services. We're going to provide you, their contact information is on the slides, and of course, I'll present it again at the end. If you have questions about the specific content, you can direct those to me. All right, let's get started. So I did want to start by giving a territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Nayanoak and Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis and Michif Nation. The University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. And so we are grateful for the opportunity to present on those lands today. So as I said, my name is Loretta Gerlach. I have about 20 years experience in business communications, organizational behavior, human resource management, and leading teams. My experience is mostly in the public sector. I have been an employee of the University of Regina for just under 19 years. That seems so long. And I work for both the non-credit and credit divisions of the University of Regina. So I bring to the presentation today a significant amount of practical and academic experience. And so I do appreciate you. I know you have lots of choices of how to spend your time, and people are really busy, especially in January. So I just wanted to personally thank you for taking an hour out of your day to spend it with me. So just speaking very quickly about today's webinar. So I am going to give you some high-level information about badges and micro-credentials. As I said, I'm going to breeze through that fairly quickly. If you have more questions, I strongly encourage you to take them to Student and Instructional Services. We'll talk a little bit about CCE in general, but we're going to spend the very bulk of our time talking about presentation and public speaking skills and some of the content that you would see in more depth within that particular badge in that business communication micro-credential. And then, of course, we'll have a bit of a question period. So I want to start by talking about badges and micro-credentials while we're on this slide. So recently, or in 2021, we did design the new badges and micro-credential program. What this is an opportunity for folks to be able to develop specific targeted skills that are so increasingly necessary in this sort of modern and evolving organizational settings that we find ourselves in. So this approach, designed by the University of Regina, is intended to help you tackle very specific pockets of skills that are all interrelated for things like tackling change, managing stress, building resilience, process improvement, customer experience, leading teams, and so on. And so what happens is there's a series of programs where folks will take an individual course and they're awarded with a particular badge. And then those badges come together to provide you with a micro-credential. This is just part of the amazing skills and talents that are taught within the continuing education program. We also offer professional seminars and professional programs that allow people to get individual seminars for skill development, or also, of course, professional certificates that will help you achieve career goals by gaining skills and knowledge in particular areas. Those programs are often more accessible and affordable and much more targeted to practical experience than a lot of other programs that you might find, or for-credit studies, for-credit classes as well. This is just a snippet right off of our website if you're looking for more information about how the program offers. It's kind of a snapshot of the critical information, but I would strongly encourage that if you go to our website at www.uregina.ca/CCE, you can find all the information you need about badges, micro-credentials, and professional certificates. And of course, as we said a couple of times already, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact our colleagues in Student and Instructor Services, and you can see their phone number and email is at the bottom of this slide, as well as all our other slides. So we have a number of micro-credential programs. I've listed them all here for your review. And again, it's really about providing people the tools that they need to adapt to emerging needs sort of strategically, but as well just to build your confidence in terms of your capacity to be able to really support the success of individuals and teams that you work with. And so we're really looking at creating opportunities for people to find improvements with the right skills, the right knowledge, the right mindset, the right interactions. So today we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking specifically about what you can see here, which is the presentation and public speaking badge, which is part of the micro-credential in business communication. So you can take that as a freestanding course if you'd like to develop your skills in presentation and public speaking, or you can take all three of those courses and get yourself a micro-credential in the area of business communications. We have different instructors that offer different courses, which is great because it gives you a wide range of opportunities to get different perspectives and develop your own capacity learning from the experience of others from a true adult education approach. So as I said, we're here today to specifically talk about presentation and public speaking skills. So this is something that, as you can well imagine, is very highly regarded by employers wanting to have those abilities and skills to be able to do that kind of thing. In addition, we know that it gives people just generally more confidence in the workplace to have an opportunity to develop your skills in presentation and public speaking. So what we're going to do now that we've done that introduction is really get into some of the specific content that we would roll out in the actual badge program. We're going to go through at a high level a number of the elements, not all of the content for today. Hopefully you will find some value in the pieces that we are going to deliver, but also in the event that you want more information, you can always reach out to me and I can tell you more about what the detailed content is in the badge program. All right, with that, let's get started. So why would anyone want to take, the presentation in public speaking program? Well, let's start with the 5 whys of this particular course. So first of all, who should take it? Honestly, everyone. There's never going to be, I would not think, someone who's just such an expert in public speaking that there would never be an opportunity for them to really revisit their skill set and the opportunities to do even better. And so whenever we can take time to learn from each other, to be able to develop our skills and abilities, I think that is, just trying to get away from that sun, it's really a great chance for us to improve our skills. So what would you find in this program? Strategies to take our presentation and public speaking skills to that very next level. Where is it applicable? Everywhere. Day-to-day content that you might have in the workplace, chatting with teams, chatting with proposals to potential clients or existing clients, job interviews, giving large presentations to whether it's a conference or something like that. These skills are applicable across the board. When? All the time. We communicate all day in our programs and in our workplaces. And so whether it's large or small exposure, it becomes really important. And finally, why? Why would you take this program? To build your confidence, to build your skill sets, to become more credible in your presentation capacity, to be persuasive, to generate enthusiasm and build relationships. I am going to step away for 1 second just to close my blind. It's funny because I was going to talk about this and now I'm going to talk about it now out of context. That's a great example of one of the things that I really want you to take away from today. So here I took time to plan for this presentation. I've done them before. I'm thinking about my location and setting. And then I still had a difficulty there where the sun shifted, the clouds dispersed, and now you couldn't see me on my camera. I could let that shake my confidence because that could have a fundamental impact on our presentation. But you know what? The reality is those kinds of things are going to happen. And it's really important that we just do our best to acknowledge when something like that happens and move forward accordingly. And one of my goals for you to leave with today, and we'll come back to this a little later on, is perfection is not the goal. Right? We want to do our best, and authentically we understand that things will happen and that you didn't take into consideration, like the clouds dispersing, or the power going out, or not having a snowstorm on the way to your event. And so it's really important that we plan accordingly, but that we're resilient in the event that some of those things happen. All right, but we'll come back to that. All right, this slide. Honestly, if you remember nothing about today's webinar, but this slide, it's a win for us. And I am sure you already do this to some degree, but again, it's just important that we take a little bit of time to really highlight this particular perspective. Whenever we're doing business communication at all, and especially when we're thinking about presentations or any kind of public speaking we're doing, the first thing that we need to do is approach our task with an audience focus. This is the single biggest mistake that people make. A lot of times we think, well, I'm going to go do a presentation because I want to teach people more about this, or I want to persuade them to do something or think a different way. And so I'm going to go and present my perspective on that. But really what we want you to do is shift away from what you want to tell people and really think about, what is your purpose and what do people need to hear and understand for you to achieve your purpose? So let's talk about that. We should have an audience lens in all the things that we do. So let's talk about how do we start with that? Well, first of all, it's a really good idea to have a purpose. Why am I doing this today? And even if it's just a 5-minute presentation at your weekly staff meeting, or you're doing a presentation to 200 people at a conference, what we want to do is be really clear about what is the outcome we want. What is our purpose that we're here for? So the first thing I would recommend is that you actually sit down and write out your purpose. And as you're designing your presentation, maybe be checking back to that purpose. Is everything that I've incorporated into my planning going to add value to the purpose? Is it going to be able to help me to get that achievement? So we want to make sure that we're really staying focused on getting the content out that we want to get out. The next thing we want to do is really think about, we're analyzing that audience. So while we're applying that purpose, what we want to do is, what do I need to tell this audience? What do I need them to learn or garner from what we're doing to be able to achieve that purpose? So part of how we might want to do that is really analyze and pay attention to our audience. We want to make sure that we're thinking about, who are they and what do they need to have that, to meet that purpose in a way that adds value to their experience? How do we make sure that at the end of our public speaking event or our presentation, that the audience we have has something to take away? There was a benefit for them to pay attention and engage with us. So we want to look for, what's the value, and be conscious about it. Think about not the value that you want to see out of this, but what is the value your audience is going to take away? Part of how we get to that conclusion is really making sure in our audience focus that we're analyzing our audience and really taking time to make sure that we understand who they are and why they're there. Some of the things I suggest you to think about is, who will I be speaking to? What do I know about them? Who are they? Why would they be there? Are they there because they want to be? Are they there because they're required to be there? Sometimes it's a combination thereof. What do they already know about my subject that I'm talking about today? Is it that everyone would be coming at it from the same place, or do I have a situation where some folks have heard this information before and some of them are hearing it for the first time? Or is this an update on something we've presented on before? What do I think I know about their current attitude about this subject matter, or even this venue or place? Like, if you're presenting at a staff meeting, do people hate your weekly staff meetings, or are they excited to be there and engage? You know, knowing that environment and culture is really important. And then think, using all that information, how can I connect to them? How can I connect to them in a way where I'm meeting my purpose, but adding value? Now, that sounds simple where I give you those questions, but of course it's a bit trickier, because sometimes if it's like a team staff meeting, you might know your coworkers really well. You can answer those questions quite easily because you actually know the people directly, you have relationships with them. That's not always the case. Sometimes when we're doing public speaking, we don't know the audience. We don't know a lot about them, and we have to fill in those blanks using our critical analysis, looking at the information that we have around us, really thinking about applying our emotional intelligence. So thinking about things like, how might they feel about this? How might someone respond to this? So it can be a bit tricky. I'm not going to make it seem like it's simple, but be as thoughtful as possible. One of the suggestions I have about this, especially if you're public speaking, let's say that CCE asks you to come in and do one of these webinars. You might want to take the time to ask our colleagues in student and instructional services, well, who usually attends those webinars? You know, are they regular attenders, or do they come for one individual particular session? Like, what does that look like for us? And so gathering as much information about our audience up front is really important. The more we understand our audience, the more we can design an approach that will be successful in getting them to move or shift or accept whatever information we're doing. And again, you know, thinking about, are we trying to get someone to change an attitude? Are we trying to get them to do something at the end, or do something differently at the end? Or are we just providing information that they need for their daily activities? The more we're thoughtful about that line and really how that works from their experience, the most important tool we can give. A lot of times in that journey to do that, we want to be persuasive. Persuasiveness is so important in the journeys that we exercise in terms of presentations in the way that I just explained to you. This is what makes often our public speaking a little different than the routine communication we do day to day in business, like sending each other emails or giving people phone calls, that sort of thing. And so what we want to do, again, when we're thinking about how do we optimize the ability to persuade others to make those shifts we've talked about, is really think about, again, that purpose, and then what would motivate them to accept or act on that purpose? What is it that would make them feel comfortable to be able to make a change? What would they need from us to be able to understand? So part of how we do that is, first of all, of course, being credible and honest. So we want to make sure we know what we're talking about, that we have at least an acceptable range of understanding of the subject matter that we can approach the event or the dialogue with individual people, and that we have at least some sort of approach that is positive and motivating. So we want to make sure that we have a message that's accurate, that offers people, that engagement, that they feel safe to be able to ask questions or express a difference of opinion. And part of how we want to do that is by anticipating what questions individual people might have. So how do we do that? Well, again, what is our past experience in the subject matter? What has there been an issue where there has been misinformation before that has been accepted as fact? Are we asking people to do something that, for example, might be a sacrifice or a challenge for them? Are we asking them to do more work? But we still want them to shift. We want to acknowledge those things and consider that. So here's an example I'm sure many people have had lots of experience with. Imagine that you have a process in your workplace that you have done the same way for a million years. And now you're going to automate that a little bit. And I don't know what that would be. It would be industry specific. Maybe you have a new database program. Maybe you've introduced something like a chatbot in your workplace. Maybe it's just some innovation in who does what in a particular order. A lot of times we know people will have resistance to that for a number of reasons. And the more we build our skill in understanding resistance, it would help. A lot of folks are resistant to ideas they didn't have themselves. Or people might be resistant because we tried this once before 10 years ago and it didn't work. And so I don't want to try it again. Or we might have people who are fearful that this change could require them to lose their job, or that they won't be able to handle the changes and then they'll perform poorly and get in trouble at work. So what we want to do is, if we're rolling out a new change, our purpose would be to have people engage in what our new process is. So when we think about, well, what would they need to be able to do that? We're going to anticipate what's our past experience been rolling out change? How did people respond to that? Were individuals involved in developing the solution or not? Were they, able to ask questions prior to this event? Do we know anything about those questions? And then what might be their concerns and fears? If we can incorporate all of that into our presentation, we might be able to, again, add value to that audience experience. And it also readies us very much for any possibility of questions and answers. When we're doing presentations, we should always anticipate that we're going to get questions at the end. Just like we're doing this today, we're going to take time at the end to hear people's questions. And sometimes those questions will come from very genuine place where people just want to learn more, or they need something clarified that we didn't elaborate on well enough in our presentation, or in the event that they want to just understand something more deeply. But sometimes it'll be in that resistance as well. Questions might come from a place of resistance. We want to look at those as not, I'm going to be really nervous because people are going to come for me and ask me all these really tough questions, but really just part of that opportunity to add value to people and recognize they're going to have concerns, questions, fears, and we want to be there to add that value. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about our mindset, about how we approach that in a little bit. This whole area of persuasion is one that we spend considerable amount of time on in our actual badge. And so if you want to learn more, that is the place to do it. I want to shift gears a little bit and now start talking a little bit more about stylistically, how do we approach our presentation? And the first thing I want to talk about is just how do we engage with the public? How do we present ourselves when we're publicly speaking? And maybe you've heard the concept of storytelling before. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do is really think about practicing your skills in storytelling. So storytelling is different than just telling a story. Telling a story is the basics. It's those 5 whys we talked about before: who, what, when, where, why, and why. But storytelling is more engaging. It reaches out to people in a really emotionally compelling way. It'll give people information that they can connect with. It's memorable, it's inspirational, it's relevant to what we want to understand. It's relatable. We can connect it to our real lives. It's a way that we can offer meaning to the content that we're delivering in a new way to allow people, that sort of ultimate audience focus. So when we're thinking about storytelling, we want to take a moment and think about a few of the elements. First of all, as we've already pointed out, clarity is important. We talked about having a really good purpose and that you have that clear purpose statement to define. But some of the ways that you might want to think about doing that is, asking your questions like Forbes magazine has a great approach to this. They talk about starting with, what do you want to talk about? So what do you want to talk about that? Now what are we going to talk about? Want to think about, how do we make it personable? How do we make sure that that clarity isn't what we think needs to be told, but what do those individuals need to answer those questions? And how to make that in a way that matters to people. We've all sat through tons of workplace meetings and presentations where we were super bored. But what we want to do is look for a way to connect to people on both a logical and rational way, but also emotional way, so that we get their attention and they can see themselves as connected to what we're talking about and why. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and this is sort of my having to close the curtain issue, is nobody's perfect. And it's okay not to be perfect. It makes us relatable. It makes us authentic. Don't try to be someone you're not. I worry sometimes, I see in social media, there's all these courses that people can take online about public speaking, but a lot of times they're really fixated on trying to get people to be very almost robotic in their approaches. Being you is awesome, and people will see that authentic you there. It makes you relatable and it makes you likable, and it's okay to make mistakes. If you go up to present and you take a sip of water, and let's say you spill water all over the front of your shirt just as you're about to start, who hasn't spilled water on themselves? It's relatable. It's okay to be vulnerable. Yes, we still want to plan to be as smooth and professional as we possibly can. But we also want to recognize nobody's perfect and nothing is perfect. And so we want to be authentically ourselves as we roll through our presentation and understand those different pieces that affect us. Also, part of being authentic is also understanding about, why are you here presenting about this? What brought you here? And thinking about things like, why is this issue a you issue? Is it something you're passionate about? Is it a moral issue? Are you really driven by the culture of your organization and just want to be part of the solutions? Is it, something strongly around innovation that you're trying to persuade people to change? Really helping the audience see where you connect to something will help them connect to something. It will inspire them and help them see that as being relatable for them. And so we want to think about, like, how did you get here? How did we get to this moment? This is where we want to make sure in our presentation that we're clearly describing the challenge or dilemma or change or whatever that we're facing, and why we can't ignore it. And it matters to take this time together today to engage in this presentation. This is where we might think about, how much, again, with our audience focus, how much do people already know about this? Or do we have to lay out a background? And if we are laying out a background, how much of that is to add value, and how much of it, because we don't want to just drone on about, well, this all started 6 years ago, and let me tell you all the things that have happened since, but really thinking about, what do people need to know to make the decision? Sometimes we don't have time to present all the extra information that we might feel passionate about. And that's where you might want to offer people other resources and places to find and learn new information. If there's any participant here today that has a really strong technical expertise, if you're in a field like medicine or engineering or something like that, where you have deep knowledge of a particular area, I think it can be really hard for those of us that have a lot of expertise in particular fields to narrow that down for audiences about what do they actually need to hear. Because a lot of times if we introduce that technical knowledge that we feel passionately is so important to the subject, we could lose those non-technical participants that we need to engage in some of that. So we really want to think about, like, what do we need to know? What is the part that they need to know to be able to move forward? I like to always stop and tell a story here. I work full-time for the government of Saskatchewan. And I remember the first time that I had to brief a cabinet minister on something. And I was getting ready for that meeting. And I, did a 10-page presentation with a ton of detail that I was really proud about in my field. And I knew it contained a ton of information. And I showed it to my boss, of course, for approval before presenting it to that minister. And my boss was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Go back and make that palatable. Take those 10 pages and make it 1 page, because this is a very busy audience member. This is someone who sees literally hundreds of these presentations in a day, and you only have a couple minutes of their time. So it's great that you know all that, but that's why you're there, right? Is to know all that. What is it that a decision maker absolutely needs to know for confidence? And that was a really tough lesson for me, because I just assume everybody wants to know everything. It's part of, we all have different personality approaches, and I like to have lots of information. I like to study things and learn new stuff. But yeah, when you recontextualize that into that audience member, think about someone who might be learning, dozens and dozens of things in a day, or having, especially decision makers, having to make decisions that they can be comfortable with, but don't have time to learn all the details. These are the things that we need to consider when we think about, why am I here, and what do I need from you, and what do you need from me, right? And so this is the approach that we want to take. A lot of times less is more, for sure. Think about, the limited time that you have. How can each sentence add that value? How does every word matter? So do your first draft, but then go through as you prepare, get rid of unnecessary phrases, explanations, words, and get yourself laser focused on a sharp, crisp, easy to follow explanation that your audience will love and be engaged. So self-editing is so important. A lot of times we want to think about that pace of how do we move that story at the right pace. Part of that will be dictated by how much time you are given in your presentation opportunities, but it is also very much driven by understanding where do we need to pause, where do we need that additional information for our audience. A lot of times you'll hear folks say you should start your presentation in the middle and then decide how much time you have to move back and forth. And so this is something that we get into in a lot more detail in the presentation, but the whole concept behind starting in the middle is it's how you grab people's attention right from the get-go. Don't give them that chance to start staring at their phone or chatting with their neighbor or something like that, that we really did engage them right there. And then you can always move back and forth in a nonlinear flow if it makes sense. And as you practice storytelling, you'll get better and better at that. Let's talk a little bit about that preparation that we were just talking about. So obviously, when you know that you have to do some public speaking, part of your success will be dictated by having a really thoughtful plan. So we talked about having a purpose and a clear idea and an audience focus, but really thinking about like, what are the other things that I need to know? What's the setting? How much time do I have? What's the room going to be like? Is it a video experience, something like Zoom or Teams? If I know that, how do I know people will be paying attention? A lot of times, like we are today, we're asking people, hey, do you mind turning off your camera for bandwidth? And that kind of thing. But then we don't know that they're actually listening or paying attention to us. So how do we optimize that engagement? How can we plan to that? Well, it makes a difference. How many people are there? Can you, if it's a small enough number, maybe you ask people if they wouldn't mind keeping their cameras on so that we know that they have that engagement. Making sure you're monitoring a chat. And if you're in a situation like this where I can't see the chat, have a colleague ready to be able to help and support that. Thinking about if it's an in-person event, where will you be located relative to your audience? Do you need a microphone to be able to be heard? Is there technology if you want to have accompanying information like PowerPoint slides? Do you need to bring something like a USB drive with your PowerPoint, or will you have access to download it from something like Google Drive? So making sure you have all that information is really important up front. So just take a few minutes. I actually have a little bit of a checklist, and I do provide it in the course for people to, just an easy checklist of things you want to know before you go in there. It includes things, by the way, like lighting, which is ironic since I failed on that a little bit here. And then we think about designing our entire presentation. Part of that design is the flow we were just talking about with storytelling. Where are you going to start? Are you going to start in the middle? Are you going to start in the beginning? What kind of rapport do you already have with the audience? Some folks will say to you, hey, you should always start with a joke. Only if you're funny. I'm not funny. I'm never going to be a person who starts out with a joke because I wouldn't seem A, authentic, and B, I wouldn't be funny, and I might alienate my audience right away. So thinking about how do we engage with people? What feels authentic to you to make that connection at the beginning of that presentation? Also then, what is the content that you need to get out? How much time do we need to set aside for things like questions in the time allotments that we have? Are you going to use visual aids like things like PowerPoint slides? If so, be thoughtful about that. And slides make such a big difference. They are there for people to help follow along. They shouldn't be your resource tool. I do know there are large multinational organizations that actually use things like PowerPoint as their presentation for folks to read. But generally speaking, best practices in presentation is really keeping slides with very few words on them, lots of visuals, fairly large font, to be able, a low number of slides that are just there to help people guide through the presentation. It does make a big difference about what the font looks like and the visual slide. If we're in a Zoom meeting like this, you can get away with a smaller font. If we're in a very large room with 300 people and there are people sitting back, we're going to want that bigger font as we project onto a screen. So just really thinking about all of those pieces. Readiness is really about getting ourselves ready for that presentation. And actually, I'm going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. But before we do talk about how to appropriately ready yourself, let's talk about public speaking in general. Lots of times when people think about public speaking, they just think, ugh, I don't want to do that. I don't like it. So why? Why do people not like public speaking? Well, a lot of folks maybe are very introverted and just speaking in general to large groups of people doesn't resonate very well for their personality. A lot of times people are afraid and worried about being judged by others. They're fearful that they'll make a mistake in their presentation or they'll have too many ums or likes. They're worried that something will go wrong with technology or lighting or timing. More often than not, what drives that fear is we anticipate what we think people are looking for from us. And then we just sort of assess ourselves, often ineffectually, about how we meet that. And then we associate judgment with that outcome. We're so hard on ourselves. And often it's not realistic. A lot of times we're a little bit off base and holding ourselves to a very sort of high standard that even sometimes our colleagues and audience members would not hold us to. And so one of the things I would encourage you to think about is there a way to take your approach to public speaking outside of that way that is centered from within about what will they think of me? How will I do? How will I come across? That kind of thing. And really shift it to what do these people need from me? And how can I do a good job to help them? How can I help move this purpose? You know, if we stop thinking about like, did I do a good job? Am I looking smart? Do I look good? Do I look competent? Do they like me? If we think instead, what a great opportunity I have today to start to add value to other people, to provide service to others, much like I'm sure most of you do all day. Most of us in Saskatchewan work in the the service industry all the time. We're here to provide services to other people, whether you're a teacher, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever, we are here to serve others. And this is just another way to do things that most of us do every day. So really shifting our focus away from what is everyone going to think about me, but really, how can I first add value to others? Where can I provide that service and support to other people? And then even take it to that next level to be like, okay, and I'm good at that. I do that all the time. I help other people. I provide services all the time. And this is a chance for me to not only continue to do that, but build my own skill set while I do it. So every opportunity that I have to lead a meeting, to publicly speak, is an opportunity for me to continue to do better. And you know what? It's okay to still be nervous while you're doing that. That's perfectly normal. And the more that we practice, the more comfortable we'll get. Some nervousness is even good. They call it eustress. It helps push us to pay attention, engage, not phone it in, make sure that we're adding that value and meeting our purpose. But at the same time, if it's debilitating us, let's shift our mindset away from that. So what we want to do to get ready is practice and practice and practice. Practice, do it in front of a mirror, do it again. The more you know your content, the more confident you're going to be. The more you practice, it'll help you develop what we call your cadence, so the rhythm of your voice. It'll allow you to be compelling in tone, emotion, meaning. It's so much better than reading to people. Please never read to people. It's okay to have notes in front of you and key points that you want to follow along with. That's great, but it can be very alienating to just read to people. That can be a bit difficult. So if you practice, become more confident, with your knowledge and the information that you're providing. So it'll allow you to be confident with the content at the same time as sort of mastering your timing and flow. You're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's okay not to be perfect. We just work at doing our best. The goal is to improve. The goal is to do our best and learn for the next time. That's what we want to do. So any kind of practicing aloud is better, by the way, than practicing to yourself. It allows you to do things like time yourself, maybe even record yourself and watch back, get a feel. If you can even practice in the room, even better, and get a feel for that room. And also understand, when do you get nervous? Some people get nervous at the beginning, some people at the end, sometimes in the middle. If you can think about that, you can practice stress reduction. And then, of course, just watch and learn from other people. Go watch how your colleagues publicly speak. Go to TED, watch TED Talks online or your favorite YouTuber. Think about, what are the strategies that other people use that you can relate with that might work for you? And of course, at the same time, looking for some form of feedback to evaluate yourself. Did I meet that goal? Did I meet that purpose? Do you have a trusted friend or colleague that's in the room that could give you feedback about what they were observing of others while you were talking, so that we can make those connections? All of this is content that we get into much more. Oops, I didn't mean to put that. See, there's another mistake. I didn't mean for that to come out that way. That we get into in a lot more detail in our course. So here's the next time that we're offering the presentation and public speaking badge. These are the different pieces that we go through, sort of the order that we go into a lot more detail. And so this is what, if you are interested in learning more, this is what you could come to expect in our CCE badge on this topic. Let's leave that for a moment for people to read through it. So with that, just a reminder that you can stay connected to us through the University of Regina CCE social media. We've listed a number of different options here. We also have an email list that you can connect to, and of course our website. And in the event that you have any questions at all about the programs, the content, the timing, the cost, all of those things, the people in student and instructor services are incredible. They are so helpful. They're so customer oriented. They are the people to go to. If you have questions about the content, you can email me. I have the same email as everybody else in the world at the University of Regina. So I'm loretta.gerlach@uregina.ca. So with that, I'm going to pause on the recording. Emma, if I could ask you to do that, we're going to shift to the Q&A part.